So welcome everybody. Today, the webinar is about how to migrate on-premise MySQL to MySQL Database Service. First slide, very quick slide that you know that it will be part on the video, so we can pass it. So my first slide is about who I am. So my name is Frédéric Descamps. Like Katie says, I am Lefred. I am MySQL evangelist. I'm managing MySQL since a long time. The first version I installed was 3.20. I'm a DevOps believer, so if you have also a DevOps question, you can reach it to me, or how to do DevOps stuff with MySQL. I will be very happy to help you. I'm living in Belgium, so it's 6 p.m. for me right now, and I have a blog called lefred.be, which talks a lot of things, covers a lot of things about MySQL. So let's go to migrate this MySQL on-premise to MySQL Database Service. The first thing, it's what do we need? So this is the first chapter. We're going to see all what we need to migrate to MDS. So if we want to migrate a running machine, we need to have this machine and have access to it, right? So we need a running MySQL server. Mine is running 8.0 and can access internet. If you cannot access internet directly, this is a bit more complicated, but it's still possible to do. But in my case, I'm using MySQL 8 and I have internet access from the server. You need to have an OCI account. So you can get a free trial on oracle.com/MySQL, right? You can see here, you click on the green button and you can try a free trial, right? And that's it. This is only thing you need to have, the MySQL server and an OCI account. So what's our plan? Because we need to make a plan to do this. The first thing we need to have, it's a VCN. A VCN with two subnets, a public and a private one. So something very important to know when you plan to use MDS, and something we really want to focus on that. And us as the MySQL team in OCI, we really want to highlight and to make people understand that we want to have the most secure MySQL environment, which means that you should never open the MySQL port to the internet. I've seen a lot of people doing this in other cloud providers. This is a very bad idea. So in OCI, you are not allowed to do that. So if you are using MDS, you are not allowed to open the port for MySQL directly to the internet. And by default, and the only way the MDS will be installed, it's on a private subnet. It means a subnet that doesn't have an access, that the internet doesn't have direct access to it, and you cannot route the access to it directly. So in the VCN we're going to create, we will have these two subnets, a public one where you can put machines or services that have access to the internet and from the internet, and the private one where you will put the database and where the MDS is also. So I will make another webinar soon also on WordPress, and you will see that the one on WordPress, the web server will be on the public subnet, and MDS, of course, the database will be on the private one. So we need to create this VCN with two subnets. Then we need to create the MDS instance, which is the MySQL Database Service instance. We create a VPN because, as I said here, we want to copy the data from on-premise to MDS, and maybe, and this is what I want to show you also today, we want to have the on-premise still active, still be the main database, so your main production, and see how the data gets in MDS, so for you to test and make all you need to get familiar with it. And when you are okay, you can then stop the on-premise and migrate or point all your services in OCI. So, and this is what we're going to do today. So we will need also to have an object storage bucket. So this will be a way to migrate the data from on-premise to MDS very quickly and to a lower cost because yeah, object storage, it's a bit different. Then we're gonna dump all the data that is in MDS first. So we're gonna dump everything and put everything in the object storage bucket. And then we're gonna load the data in MDS. When all this is okay, so we have kind of a copy of our on-premise database at a certain time. After that, like I said, we don't stop the production. We don't stop our on-premise database. So it means the data still goes there, but we have a copy that was consistent at a certain point. And after that, we're gonna create an inbound replication to MDS. So this is what we will cover today. This is the most, I would say, interesting part of the webinar. So this is how it looks like. So we have on-premise one machine. It has a VPN, it's a VPN client, and it has an IP in MyVPN subnet. Then we're gonna replicate the data through the internet and through this VPN to OCI, to MDS. So, and we can see here on the small graph, the two subnets, the public one, which has an internet gateway, and the private one, let's say that is not accessible directly from the internet. So on the premise MySQL instance, we have this VPN client. I will use OpenVPN and with a static AP. So it's, let's say, more easy to have a static IP. So we can, when we create this replication channel on MDS, we can point to it. And we will also use MySQL Shell. This is a very powerful MySQL client that has a lot of utilities. And we're gonna see today some utilities, which is the MySQL Shell dump and load to dump data very fast and very easily to OCI because you understand all this architecture. Then this was on premise, and on OCI, we will have this big VCN, right? Which is cover 10.0.0.0.16. Then one internet gateway, two subnets in that big range, one public 10.0.0.0/24 and one private 10.0.1.0/24. Then we will create an OpenVPN server instance. This will be a compute instance, but we're going to use the one very easily to install from the marketplace in OCI, very useful. And finally, we have this MDS instance, which in my case has an IP 10.0.1.11. And as you can see, this instance is on the private subnet, right? And we will create an inbound replication channel to there. First, the inbound replication channel, it's something now that is in LA, so limited availability. So you need to request for it. And let me see, I was looking if, because I asked when it will be GA, but it should be GA very soon. But right now, today, it's not yet GA. It's still in test, but you can request it. But I will show you how to use it because it should be GA very, very soon. So first, this, oh, it went out full screen. So first, this object storage, so that we need also to create. And I will show you this is very easy to create and how to create and how we put data to it. So first thing, like I said, we need to create this virtual cloud network, so the VCN, to migrate our data. So in my case, I will show you as a new user to OCI. If you already have used OCI for other compute instances or to test MDS, you don't need to recreate a new VCN and new subnets. If you have a private subnet, MDS will be in it, and if you have a public subnet to access your MDS, it should be already there and you can use it. But in my example here, I will show you how to use that from scratch, right? So the first thing we do is that we create this VCN on the 10.00.16 range, and we use the OCI dashboard. So as you can see, we create a virtual cloud network, we give it a name. So in my case, I call it LeFred VCN, and we don't forget to put the right CDR block, which is the range we want, 10.0.0/16, right? Then we can leave all the default, it's good for us, we create the VCN. In this, in the way I show you here, I show you as you create it manually. There is also a wizard, if you do overview VCN, if you have OCI just in front of you, and if you follow it, it will create all the next step related to the VCN automatically for you. So the private subnet, the public subnet, and all the internet gateway, but I will show you how to do it one by one in case you need to change something. So here we can see when the VCN is created, we can see it here, and it is available. It's very fast to have it. It shows the range, the DNS, and the default route it has. So nothing trivial here. It's very easy to do that. It's just 2 clicks. Then we create the 2 subnets. So on the VCN details page, so you can see it here, virtual cloud network details, we can create subnets. So I don't have any subnet. I will create one. And the first I will create will be my public one. So on 10.0.0/24, I give it the name public subnet, and I give it the CDR block that I want, so 10.0.0/24. And of course, I need to tell it this subnet, it's for public subnet. So there is here a radio button that you need to select to say, I want to allow public address to be available on some instances in this subnet. It's not mandatory that all the machines in the subnet get a public IP, but if you need it, it's possible and it's allowed. So we need to do public subnet. So when this is done, you click on create it, it creates it, and then you create the next one, which is the private subnet. Private subnet, you give it a name. I call it private subnet LeFred, and you need to have the range on 10.0.1/24 to give another range to separate both of them. Of course, once again, here we need to say it's private subnet. We don't allow public IP to go on any instances in this subnet. Like I said earlier, it's very important that all your database are in the private subnet. Databases, if you are using MDS, directly goes on private subnet, no choice, and it's good like that. If you are using a compute instance to add to MySQL, could happen, I really recommend you to also put it in the private subnet. So you are sure it's the best practice, right? So when they are created, you can see here we have the 2 subnets in this VCN. 2 subnets, this is what we need. We are happy. So the next point will be now to create this MDS instance, right? So let's create that. So in the OCI menu you have here, you have MySQL DB systems. You go there and you create your MySQL DB instance. So create MySQL DB system, it's called here. You just click on it, and then you have a wizard that you need to follow to create your MDS instance. It's also very easy to do. So let's check it together. You give it a name. So here for me, it's my MySQL Database Service instance, so my MDS. Then you have a description. More and more you have systems, better is to have a nice description explaining what it is. Then you have here the availability domain. So in the area I am right now, there is 3 availability domain. You can see I am in US Ashburn. Then you can also, so you can select the availability domain you want. Then you can select also the default domain. So this is very specific to OCI, which is very nice because it has, when you want to do something different and create your instance, here you have this different kind of domain. It's a full domain, but it has, so if one, it's a layer under the availability domain, so with less latency, but still giving you availability. So it's something very nice that you have in OCI. You can choose that or not, but by default, it will choose one if you don't specify one. Then you have also a configuration. I don't know if you followed last week Mark Lee's presentation. He was showing you how to configure or to create configuration for MDS instances. So you can pick it here. I leave the default here. So the next page of the wizard, it's of course, create administration credential. So something very, very important in the CI. So the first thing I said earlier is that we are very picky and we take a lot of attention on security, not allowing people to connect and to let open their MySQL instance to the internet, but we also very careful on security we provide to some users. So here, when you create an admin, you won't have the root, let's say, account. This is let's say, by default, you don't have all these privileges. So you need to create a user. So in my case, I create a new user, it's admin, and you have to put a password. The password, it's very also secure here. You cannot put AZRT, QWERTY, or 123. It follows the recommendation, the very secure recommendation you need to have, like capital, numbers, different characters and stuff like that. So please don't forget it, because it's very important to remember these credentials. Then you are not allowed to change, but if you have multiple private subnet, you will see them here, but you are not allowed to make it on the public subnet. So by default, it will find the first private subnet, and we have only one, so it goes there. So it goes on the VCN, private subnet, and then also the port. You can modify that, but Mark already talked you about that. But so here I leave it default, 3306 classic MySQL protocol, 33060 for the X protocol if you want to do CRUD operation or document store stuff. It's very, very important. And we are the only one providing you this X protocol. So very happy on that too. The last page of the wizard, it's about the backups. So here you can enable automatic backup. By default, this is the default screen. So you can see the retention period, it's 7 days. And you can specify a backup window. I all leave default here. So this means that as soon as created my instance, every day it will be backed. When it's done, we have the detail here, and you can see, okay, this is the IP of my MySQL Database Service instance. It runs 8021, and the IP is in the private subnet 10.0.1.11 in my case. Okay. So now we have a VCN, we have an instance of MySQL running, but this is not enough. So what we need to do, the next step, and maybe I would say the only a bit complicated one, it's the VPN. So because security is important, you need to have a VPN to connect to your OCI. But in our case, it's even more important than only to connect to our MDS instance, but using a VPN, you allow your MDS instance to connect some computers on premise. So in the other way. So, and this is why we also use a VPN in our case. Something very nice with the VPN, it's that you need to create that only once. You don't need to create VPN for every service you have in OCI or stuff like that. So it's very easy to create a VPN. So you have here in networking, VPN connections, and you can then have a wizard that allows you to create VPN. Depending on what you have on premise, it is most likely possible that you already have some hardware or capabilities to use very easily the VPN here. So for example, you can see these are the CPE vendor list we support directly in OCI. So there is some Cisco, Yamaha. For people using Linux, you have LibreSwan. So you can do that by yourself. But if you have Juniper or other stuff, you can see it's also very easy to do it from here. Unfortunately, for myself, I don't have such a hardware or such system. So there is yet another way to do it, and it's to use OpenVPN. So in my case, you can see here, so when you want to create this IPsec tunnel, there is some note on top that telling, oh, you can create an OpenVPN access server if you want. Check it in the marketplace. So if you click there, right, what you can see is that you have this OpenVPN access server and you can launch the stack. This is very easy. You just need to click and the deployment will be completely automated, made by Terraform. You will see at the end of the webinar that we will have soon another MySQL Day. And if you're interested in MySQL and Terraform, there will be hands-on labs where we talk about that. There is my colleague Johannes will also use Terraform, and I will use Terraform for the DB cluster. So this was just a parenthesis if you are interested to that. So when we deploy that, we just need to have a name. We need to put a description, and then we do next. And we have which computer, depending how many clients you want to have, maybe you want to have a bigger shape, but by the default one for one system like we want to do, it's enough. You need to have a user, the password, some credentials to connect to it. Of course, the VPN needs to be accessible from the internet, because if not, there is no sense to do it. And we need to specify it in the public subnet. So this is what we did. We created and we say, okay, put it in the public subnet, use an existing VCN, so the one we created earlier, because we want to connect to our MDS we already created. And finally, you let it go and you will see all the Terraform log showing. And at the end of the log page, you will see that the user admin you create, the password will be hidden, and it will give you a URL where you can connect to your VPN server, web server configuration. And you can see in the compute instances, you have also the public IP that matches, of course. So here, we don't create any rules to open the port, the HTTP or HTTPS port, all that, the port for OpenVPN, all that it's made by Terraform in the marketplace object we created it. So we have nothing else to do. So we go on that IP, on that URL, right? And this is, we use the credential we just created. So it was root and then some complicated password, and you signed in. So when you have done this, it's time to do the configuration that we need for us, for the client that will be used on premise, right? So what we need to do here, we need to set up two networks, one in dynamic that we don't really care right now for this exercise of migrating the data, and one static. The static is the one that interests us because we're going to give a static IP to the client that will be located on the MySQL on-premise server we have. So here we put some range, right? Then this is very important, is that we will not use nothing, but we're gonna use routing. So we're gonna use routing, and we will also specify which subnets we want to route through the VPN. And it's of course 10.0.0.0/24, 10.0.0.1/24, right? So when we have done that, we need to create a user that will be used on the MySQL server on-premise we have to connect to the VPN. So we go in user permission, we create a new user. My user, it's called Lefred. And when you have the user, there is a small more settings button there to edit it. You need to, so you put the password and everything, but then you need to give more settings. And these extra settings are the static IP that will be defined for that user using the VPN. So here I put one of the IP in the static range we have. So in my case is 172.27.232.134. And this, it's important because this is the IP that MDS will use to connect to the server to replicate the data from it. Then we need to say we use routing, we use again the same subnet, and we want to be able to connect all server-side and private subnets. So when we do that, we save it. The wizard will tell you, okay, you need to restart it. And you say refresh, it will restart it. And after that, you use again the same URL that we used before, but you don't need to use the /admin. And you will join one page like this. You connect with Lefred, so or the user you created, you put the password, you signed in, and this is what you get. You have configuration. It says, oh, it seems you are using Linux, which I do. And then you say, okay, give me that profile. And you will save one file that has all the VPN information. The name of the file, it's called client.ovpn, right? So we do that, you click on it, you download it, and then you need to install OpenVPN on that server on premise. So for me, on the MySQL server. Now, if you have a router that you want to use, it's also possible. And then you need to just play with the routing, the TCP routing, and that's it. For my case, I install the OpenVPN directly on the MySQL server I have on premise. So I install OpenVPN. Then you need to put this downloaded file client OVPN, and you put it in etc OpenVPN client, and you call it client.conf. When it's done, I use systemd to start the VPN. So I say, okay, please open VPN client with the client configuration. He asks me the username is the one we created in the OpenVPN. It's Lefred, the password, and we are connected. We can see here this machine. So my machine, it's the one on premise, right? I check the status and it says, okay, VPN is running. And you can see that it created a 10.0 interface with the fixed IP I wanted to use. This was a long chapter. And like I said, this is the most complicated part of the webinar. But it is also, let's say, the one thing that you will do only once. Now that you have your VPN server there, or if you have created IPsec interface and tunnel using another method, once your VPN is there and running, you don't need to create every time a new one. So this was a one-shot thing to do. Now it's done, you can use it whenever you want. So our VPN is there, meaning that our on-premise can connect to to our system, our MDS system in OCI. So when we have done that, we're going to also create an object storage to migrate all our data. We're going to use that to save all the data in an object store and then restore it on MDS. So we go in object store in the OCI dashboard, object storage, we click it, and we create a bucket. Of course, you use the name you want. It's very easy. For me, I will call Le Fred bucket. I'm not very original in the names, right? And you create the bucket, and that's it. It's done. So I said the most complicated part was the VPN, and the second most is this file. If you use a Terraform, you should know OCI config files are made, so you're maybe comfortable with it. But if not, this is what it looks like. And you need to create this OCI config file to be able to connect with anything like Terraform. But for us, in our case, is to use MySQL shell to just connect with OCI. So this is how it looks like. So you have a user and you need to put here your OCID of the user. Of course, my OCID doesn't look like this, but it starts like OCID1.user. All this information, you get it from the OCI dashboard. So you go in OCI dashboard, you go in your profile, then you have your details of your user, and there is the OCID, the starts of it, and not completely. And then you say copy, and you can copy it here. The fingerprint for the key you have, the key you are using, then the tenancy you are using, the compartment you are using, and finally the region. So these are the important settings, and you find all this information in the dashboard. So you copy everything from the dashboard, right? So when you have that, you are done to be able to use the shell and OCI, and in our case, the object storage bucket we created. Another thing very important to allow to do that, it's that we need to have GTID enabled on our on-prem server, right? So GTID, it's very, very important because it's the only way we will be able to replicate from on-prem to OCI. I don't know if a lot of people are still using replication with the GTIDs, but if in the case, if you want to migrate to MDS, you will need to have GTID enabled. So the first thing to do is, okay, let's have a look at it. So this is how you check, select and the global variable GTID mode. And you can see that my machine on-prem was not using GTID. So the first thing we need to do is to enable that, right? GTID are disabled, we need to enable it. Watch out, I don't know what's the replication topology. Maybe you will have to do some changes in the replicas you already have or on that machine. In my case, it was a single instance without replicas. So it doesn't make, it's not very important if I change the GTID. So how do we do that? It's possible to just enable it and then restart MySQL. I don't want to restart my server. So what to do that? I will use the set persist, and here I just changed I need to be sure that there is a server ID. So I do set persist server ID equal 1. Then I will enforce GTID consistency to true. Then you cannot put GTID mode to on directly. You need to put it to stop it, put it to on and restart it, or you can pass by different steps. And this is important if there are some replicas to it. It's not my case, but the server doesn't know that. So what we need to do is to put first GTID mode off permissive, then go on GTID mode on permissive, and finally GTID mode equal on. This is the only way you can enable GTID without having to restart MySQL D. It's not complicated. It's 5 lines, so 5 commands. So this is what I did. So now I have GTID and I can check it. what's my GTID mode, and my GTID mode is on. So now that I have GTID, I will be able to start everything I need. Now, like I said earlier, before we can migrate all that data to OCI, what we need to to take some time or some attention, it's about security again. So routing and security. We need to allow our server, because it used the VPN, but we need to allow that traffic, and we haven't done it yet, right? And we need to also know what's the routing to get one side to the other one, right? So we need to add some routing rules, which can be, I won't say it's complicated, but sometimes people are looking for that because they are not familiar with OCI yet. And so I will show you how to do that. So the first thing, we go on the private subnet and we add a root here. So there is all the root rules, and you add a root rules. So what we need to do is we need to route the traffic for the VPN static range. So 172.27.232.0/24. I will use the full range. I could have used only that single IP of my client, but I use the range in case I wanted to have other machines and other clients through the VPN server. The VPN server is 10.0.0.11. You have that in the compute instance dashboard. You can see what the private IP of the VPN server. So I said, okay, if I want, the target type will be a private IP. I will put here the range of my VPN clients, and I need to use 10.0.0.11 to route that, routing to OpenVPN. That's it. It's not complicated, but you need to know it, right? And you need to do it. So when it's done, it's very easy and you are ready to do it. So now the routing will work, but we also need to open the ports, right? So we need to go in the security list we have, right? And there is one, the default one. So we go in the private subnet security list and we say, I want to add a new ingress rule. And there we allow for that range access to the port 3306 for the classic MySQL protocol and 33060 for the X protocol. We don't really need in this exercise the X protocol, but it's always nice to have. So we do that, right? So we also, so this is what we did. And here we also need to create in the default security list for the VCN, right? We need to open also the port from that source. So 10.0.0.16, we need to be able to connect so the OpenVPN itself can connect there if needed, right? So when we did that, and this is very important, this one, because the first time it comes from somewhere else, but after it will be also coming from the VPN server. When we have done all the security and the routing, we are ready to finally dump and load all the data from on-prem to MDS using MySQL shell. So to dump the data, first we connect on localhost on the on-prem machine. So I am using the shell here, right? And then I will dump the instance. Dump instance is part of the util global object we have in a MySQL shell. And for example, you may have already used util to see if you can migrate from 5.7 to 8.0. It's part of the util. And dump instance, it's part of it. So this is how it looks like. The command line itself, it's when you see it for the first time, might be a bit complicated, but what you do is you say, okay, I want to use util dump instance. The name is on premise, so you put a name there. Then you say, okay, I will use OCI config file, and it's the OCI config we created earlier, a bucket name, le thread bucket, the OS namespace. This is a bit weird, but you get it on the details page on the OCI dashboard. Then the threads, how many threads you want to have. And here I want to have 4 threads. Is it to go to OCI MDS? You say true, then there is some checks for the security and stuff like that. And then you says the compatibility needs to have strict restricted grants, meaning that there are some security grants or that you are not allowed to have on MDS, because don't forget that on MDS, all the server is managed by the MySQL team, not by yourself anymore, right? And it's a service. And so you need to say, okay, if I have some user that have some grants that are not compatible with MDS, I want to remove these 2 permissive grants. So you do that. And strip definers is also needed to be allowed to import all tables, but also triggers and everything, and functions and everything we have in our instance to OCI. So when we do that, and it will dump all the data to object storage, and that's it. Then I am in the shell right now. You can see that locally because I use local. Also, I am on premise. My shell is open on premise. Then I will connect using the user I have on MDS and the private IP of MDS. So private IP of my MDS instance is 10.0.1.11. So from the same shell, I connect there, and you can see I'm allowed to connect. And you can see here that MDS is not using Community Edition, but Enterprise Edition. And I'm at 8.0.21 MySQL Enterprise. And now that I've done that, I just need to load back the all data that I've stored in the object storage. So I use load dump on premise, then the OCI config file again, the bucket name where I put everything, the OS namespace again, and how many threads I want to restore the data. Here I put it 4. And that's it. It loads all the data, and now I have all my data that I had on premise already on MDS. Meanwhile, I told you I didn't stop my on-premise server, meaning that it still gets data, right? Now, if you are a bit, let's say, used to MySQL or already a MySQL user, you know that when we restore a logical dump from a source in the replica, what needs to be done to be sure that the data is consistent, and that if we open a replication stream, we won't replicate again the same data. So what needs to be done? If you have played with old stuff like MySQL dump and stuff like that, there is something very important, and it's to set the GTID purged. So we need to do that, and we need to get that information because this is not automatic. So what we need to do, and also when we have that information, we need to set it. And the only way we can set it in MDS, it's by calling this setGTID purge function from sys, right? So the data of what are the GTID, the consistent GTID information we already purged when we took this logical dump, it's stored in this at.json file. So if we go on the left bucket object storage, there is that file that you can see on premise at JSON, right? And you can download it. You download it, and then you check it, and there is in it that value of the purge GTID. So when you've done it, you will just call in SQL, I'm in JavaScript here in the shell. So in SQL, you do call sys set GTID purge and that value. And that's it. Now you have a consistent load on MDS that is ready to become a replica of your on-premise server. So here now, we're going to use inbound replication. Like I said, this is not yet GA, it's LA for the moment, to be able to replicate the data. So what we need to do, it's first to create a user. So we're going to create a user, I will call it REPL, and it will connect from this private subnet, and he has a password and require SSL. And then I just want to give the replication grants required to become a replica. So it's it. It's just a user creation for usual use for replication. Then, if you have requested to have this MDS Replication Channel, or as soon as it's GA, you will have this. You have in the MDS, you have channel button here. So you go there in the menu, and then you just create a channel. And you follow the wizard, it's very easy. So the wizard is where you're gonna create it, in which compartment, what is the MySQL source. And here, as you can see, I will use the static IP of the VPN client I have on my on-premise server. Then I use the credential we just created for replication. So the user was REPL with a very complicated password. And you create it. It will take a small amount of time. And when all the check is done, you will see this channel active with all the information. You can see here which the host name is, and it uses SSL mode and stuff, and where it is, right? And you can see here, for example, by default, you will see it has 4 workers, and you can see that it replicates directly, and we can see which was the last applied transaction, which worker applied it and stuff like that. So now we have replication between our on-premise, that is our production, and a server in MDS, where there you can run some queries to see the speed or to get comfortable with MDS before you move all your load to directly, or your workload directly to MDS. So the conclusion of this, it's that no, the instance is MDS. It's kept up to date with the data from the on-premise MySQL. When you're ready, you go to, and when it's done, you can relax and rely on the MySQL Database Service to do all the checks, taking the backup, taking care of your database as they can do.